Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
When I got on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, I was trying to figure out some things that I could do to be involved and stuff. And I had left McLaren to travel, and I came back. When I came back, Dr. Obeid was here already working, and he's a great guy. He's an excellent interventional cardiologist. He's great to work with. He's got a great bedside manner and just a very genuine person. But it was like a year after that before I even knew that he was Muslim. You know, it was amazing to me. And I knew because after Ramadan's done, he always goes and buys the cath lab lunch, which is a plus. So he, food, you know, the cath lab, yeah, we all know what's going on. So he went to, he started his education at the University of Michigan. He's got a Bachelor of Arts in Economics. From there he went to the Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, where he got his DO there. He's board certified in interventional cardiology, and internal medicine. In addition to that, he is on the Michigan State University as a clinical instructor. He holds certificates for advanced trauma life support, advanced cardiac life support, basic life support, and also as an emergency medical technician that I did not know that he, you know, before I got this from him. So yeah, he's an excellent physician, and he'll be glad that this is done because I bug him every week. Don't forget about May 10th, Dr. Obeid. So on that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Obeid.
Hello, everyone. And this will be nice to meet you all. It's a good spot. So I'd like to keep this informal. I'd like to keep it interactive and really answer any potential questions you may have. I could share a little bit of my experience. So I was born and raised in Oakwood Hospital down in Dearborn. Actually worked at Oakwood Hospital after my fellowship. So my parents were born and raised in Damascus, Syria. My dad did medical school in Damascus, Syria. They got married and they did their honeymoon in Detroit, Michigan. So they were a little bit surprised when they arrived. But that's where he did his residency. They had like a 2-3 year plan for him to finish his residency and then move back to Syria. The entire family, huge extended family in Damascus. And so 2 years became 3, 3 became 5, and 5 became 45. So they ended up, of course, sticking around as he established himself. So although they were born and raised in Damascus, after they moved here, me and my siblings were all born and raised in the Detroit area. So thankfully, growing up as an Arab, Syrian, Muslim in the Detroit area, you know, thankfully was pretty smooth. I think other people, perhaps in different areas of the nation, may have a different experience. But really a lot of immigrants from really not only Syria, but all over the Middle East tended to gravitate towards the Detroit area. Everybody's pretty familiar with Dearborn. It's like a mini Arabia. And so growing up, we had friends and family that looked like us, practiced like, you know, and so it made that growing up really seamless for us. And for the most part, I didn't really feel much different than other people. You know, we are Muslim. My mother would wear the traditional headscarf, the hijab. And, you know, growing up back in the 80s, that wasn't very common. And so, of course, you know, one of the things that I used to remember the most is like walking into a restaurant. It seems like everybody would stop and stare. You know, not like in a toxic way at all, but more in a curious way. But so we kind of knew a little bit that we're a little bit different. We didn't really look different. Like Bob said, he didn't know I was a Muslim until I bought him lunch after Ramadan. But I think the hardest part really was internal. It was for me because I'm a Muslim growing up in America, and every summer we used to go to Syria, so it's like I had this personality, not a disorder, but growing up, I felt like half of me was this Arab, Muslim, Syrian, growing up in America. And so trying to really establish my identity. Was I more of an Arab? Was I more Syrian or Muslim American? And so that part was a little bit challenging from an internal standpoint. And I think a lot of my siblings kind of felt the same way, friends as well. And so, you know, you grow up in elementary school and everybody's celebrating Easter and Christmas, and then you're, you know, that's, oh, what do you get for Christmas kind of thing? And you're like, not really, not much. And then you try to explain your holidays. And, you know, especially back then, not a lot of people knew about the Muslim traditions and the Muslim holidays. Thankfully, in the last couple of decades, people have, I think, the tradition has been more widespread and people are aware of the certain traditions that we experience. You know, you'll see commercials about happy Ramadan, happy Eid to Muslims celebrating across the US and stuff like that. In an odd way, really, after 9/11, you would have thought that it would have hurt and we would have been kind of scrutinized. But really, people started asking questions after 9/11, like, who are Muslims? What is this faith? And I think that opened up a lot of discussion amongst groups. And so I really actually feel like, although it was one of the most horrible times in our memory, after 9/11, I think people started asking questions and people started to really understand what is mainstream Islam and trying to understand the truth behind that. And so it made it a little bit easier, actually, as we moved into the turn of the century. And so I think to try to tie this into medicine, you know, up in the Bay City area, we may not have that many Middle Eastern or Muslim, but like when I worked down in the Detroit area, there were a lot of, especially in Obeid Hospital, which is in Dearborn, a lot of my patients did not speak English. They actually were pretty traditional Muslims. And so there are certain things that we would have to take into consideration. For example, you know, we don't eat pork products, we pray 5 times a day. So I think having that sort of understanding would make it easier for us to treat the patients and make them more comfortable in the setting, especially when they're sick in the hospital. So, but I felt like really there was such a heavy presence of Arab patients that even the non-Arab nurses and staff, they knew all about the tradition as if, you know, they followed the tradition. So I think that made it so much easier, really, as when I was working down in the Detroit area, is that everybody kind of understood and really Detroit is almost like a melting pot. You think about it, not just the Muslim faith or Arabs, it's really every faith. And so up here in Bay City, it's a little bit different, but I think it's important for us to really understand that there are certain, you know, the diversity is just spreading in the country. And I think it's important for us, of course, to deal with respect, but in a sense to almost understand where they're coming from and understand certain traditions, and just that way it'll make them more comfortable. You know, for me, especially growing up, you know, Muslims, if you guys are aware, we pray like 5 times a day. And so, especially growing up in high school, trying to maintain that is difficult because you have prayers in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. And so, thankfully now, like, my kids are in high school. And it's amazing that now, you know, they have certain areas in the school that they make it available for people of all faith to be able to practice. So it's nice. I feel like as a whole, as the country progresses and we have groups like this, and I think it's the value of the value of these groups is huge. And my wife is involved in certain groups as well with regards to schools and high schools and trying to make all people of all faith feel comfortable when we're at, because it was a little bit tough for me. You know, thankfully I didn't really face much like discrimination. Thankfully, I was extremely blessed in that situation. You know, growing up like in the Detroit area, Bloomfield area, you know, of course, there's some comments here and there you would hear, but thankfully it was quite seldom. And so I felt like I was very, very blessed in that situation. And another practice that we follow is Ramadan. We just finished Ramadan actually a week ago. If you're familiar, Ramadan is a month of fasting where we stop eating and drinking from around sunrise, and it extends all the way until sunset. No food, no drinking, and then at sunset, you could eat and drink whatever you want. It's a very, very, it sounds more difficult than it really is. It's actually a very, very festive and spiritual time. The purpose behind Ramadan is not just to starve ourselves. The purpose is really spirituality, and you do feel it. When you push worldly things aside, you do develop some sort of a spirituality. And it's actually extremely festive because at sunset every night, it's a feast and friends and family. So actually a lot of people look forward to Ramadan, and the Cath Lab does too, because we end up finding So, but I think it's important to see these, or to appreciate these traditions, because although living in working in Bay City, I have encountered people of different faiths, and even the Muslim faith, and sometimes they see me and they see my name is Obeid, and right away you can see that they line up like, oh, somebody here that may understand where I'm coming from. So I think it's just, especially with the efforts of a group like this in terms of trying to develop that understanding, I think it's priceless, really.